quite different in functionality. And of course, we know that the economy here in the United States thrived in the South on slavery. However, we're going to go beyond, this particular time period. We should know that by 1865, President Lincoln emancipated slavery. So he emancipated the slaves and they became free. But this meant something completely different for these people who were enslaved, and now they are free. Now that they are free, they're allowed to have an education that they were not afforded before. Because if you were found out that you were learning how to read and learning how to write, you were either, you were beaten, or the worst of it, your life. And so, now that they're free, everything points toward how do we thrive? How do we survive? We spent so many years being ruled and being run by a certain body of people who, in some sense, took care of us. They provided some housing of sorts, wasn't the best. They provided some food, and again, wasn't the best, usually the leftovers from the master's house. So now how do we do all of this on our own? So now education is starting to become afforded, which you get into the Reconstruction period after the Emancipation Proclamation, 1865, and up to about 1896, you've got Reconstruction, and from that particular point, you're now introduced to Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow is really another form of slavery in a sense. Because although they are free people, they're now bound by these laws that says you can have what we have, everything is separate but equal. And although it's supposed to be separate but equal, in reality, it's not really truly equal. Because we're going to hold back on funding that your schools will need. We're going to pour all of the funding into this school, but we're not really going to do all that much for it. We're going to give some to say that we're meeting the status quo. But we can't really put all of that here. And so within this time period, you're now starting to see a rise in these African peoples who are now considered to be part of the United States, and yet considered 3/5 of a person at this point in time, based upon the Constitution. And within this time period, you're now starting to see these people rise up, and they're wanting businesses of their own. They're wanting more housing of their own. They're wanting things that they were not afforded before. And in this time, you're starting to see more people starting to get into education. And within the education, they now want to know more about who they are as a people. By way of this, digging into their history, some things are still stripped, some things are hidden, so they're not afforded the opportunities to know who they really are because of everything that was stripped from them. And so you start seeing different things pop up over a period of time. Skip forward a little bit, we get into the 1950s, and now you're entering into when civil rights begin to take place, where you've got people such as Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Thurgood Marshall on the scene. And Thurgood Marshall, which many people don't give a lot of credit for, but Thurgood Marshall is at this particular point in time, he is a lawyer in the 1950s. And he is the lawyer who presented this case before the courts, the U.S. Supreme Courts to be more specific, to fight for civil rights. You say that we are equal to you, you're going to give us things that we didn't have before. However, that's not what we're seeing. So we really need, if you're going to do this thing and be equal for us, we really need you to come through. And so they present this court case. Within this time, they win the case based upon what Thurgood Marshall does. Later on, you skip forward, 1960s, You've got these marches that are taking place, and so much is happening within the world over, but here in the United States, to be more specific, you see the bounds and pushing the borderlines of what we know to be a social construct known as racism, where you have the world seen through the lens of black and white. And Dr. King marching to the nation's capital, speaking of, I have a dream. And it's not just that I have a dream that I will own a house. It's not just that I will have a dream that I can own a car, but it's I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will be able to join hands with boys and girls who do not look like them. And they can stand together in unity. They can stand together in peace. They can stand together and not be presented as so much as different because of the hues of their skin, or what we know in research as the phenotype, their skin color, but being judged by the content of their character and their hearts. And so now you fast forward in time and you become in the 1970s, and within this frame of time, you're starting to see these people now coming up, and they're wanting to know even more about their history. They're wanting to know more about who they are, why they are, how did we come to be, how did we get here, and how can we move beyond this particular place where we're still dealing with being stripped from different things we don't have access to. And so within this, you see the African diaspora beginning to spring up here in the United States, so that this sense of Africanism is recognized. And these people, where you have the Black Power movement, where they are invigorating and they're wanting to enthrill with the sense of being black, is a beautiful thing. Not something to be ugly, not something to be stripped away from. But just because your skin is darker, don't make you any different than anybody else. And so you start getting songs within time that's representative of this time shift. One of those particular pieces that the band is now going to perform is the African Marching Song, with the sense from the 6th grade band, as they were 5th grade last year, singing a portion of this piece, and the full band playing the remainder of it.